Hello, I'm Mark Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have the pleasure of Mark Ash, Chief Revenue Officer or CRO of Konica Minolta in the studio. How are we doing, Mark?
I'm very well, and I think I'm going to have to be Mark 2 today, aren't I? Because you're definitely Mark 1.
Yeah, well, you're different spelling anyway. You're okay.
Yeah, I always wanted to be C when I was younger. I thought it was cooler.
It is cool.
I thought it was more continental.
Everyone says to me, oh, actually, Mark, are you from France? Like, France? I'm from Maidenhead. What do you mean France? They'll think because I've got Mark with a C, they actually think I'm French.
Yeah, but you look more like Tyson Fury. So I'd say more Morecambe.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you very much. So, Mark, I wanted to kick off today because we've spoken a few times before anyway, but I think I said to you over lunch, I was looking at your background and I thought, okay, what we're going to ask Mark today? And I wanted to find out a bit about your background, about the decisions you made going into your industry. Because you did sociology at university.
I did.
But your first job, now I'm not taking a piss when I say this, but your first job, I don't know how you aspire to do this, but was in like a print room in Xerox, like an operations role, wasn't it?
It was,
so what, how was that disappointment after doing a degree? How does that work? How do you go from sociology into like in the print room?
Great question. I didn't finish the degree. I think that's the first part. So I left, and I left for reasons best left unmentioned. But I followed a lady, left university, and I needed a job, and I started temping. And it was then that I realised one thing that I didn't like doing, and that is I struggle sleeping at the best of times, or I did struggle sleeping. And I got a job temping, working nights. By far and away the worst thing I've done on planet Earth, when you're on a nice summer's day and everybody else is going to work and you're coming home from work trying to get to sleep. And I got offered a job temping at Xerox, and I learned very, very rapidly that if you work hard, there's a lot of people out there that don't work hard.
Yeah.
And therefore, if people are hiring and they're hiring a hard worker, it means that if they don't want to work hard, they can work less. So I was taken on Xerox in a print room on a temporary contract. They made me permanent, and then the rest is history.
Let's talk about the history, because you were doing a print role for a couple of years, and then you obviously got an opportunity to go into sales. Because doing your degree, were you thinking you were a salesperson then?
Absolutely not. And actually, one thing, working in operations, you grew to dislike salespeople, because salespeople would come in and they would sell what they wanted to sell, not what the customer needed. And you'd know this because you'd be the operator. So you'd be the person that actually worked on the product that the salesperson sold. And it was only after working in operations that I progressed rapidly through a number of different roles. I then moved into management, and management at 19 scares the shit out of you. Well, it did with me. I think unless you've been to Sandhurst or you've had some formal training, managing was terrifying. But actually through managing people, you then come into contact more with the customers and more with salespeople, and my career changed. But I actually had the fortune of working for Richard Branson at Virgin Atlantic whilst I was at Xerox in the print room.
Really? Wow.
And that was an unbelievable experience, because you got to see Richard firsthand, because that business was in its formative years, and you got to see what looking after the staff talked about. So as we had a discussion again about lunch, looking after your people. So he used to send his top performers to his private Caribbean island, Necker Island. You can't, money can buy that, but a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't earn that in a year for what it would cost to go for a weekend. So I got to actually meet my wife in Richard Branson's garden, because he threw a garden party for the staff.
Wow. So when your first opportunity into management, you were 19?
19.
And who were you managing? What was it?
So I was managing the print room staff. And again, really, really interesting, because you're meeting people whose career is to be in that print room for life. And they don't want some spiky-haired, lanky 19-year-old coming in that thinks they know the world if they're in their 40s and 50s and have been there and they're very well tenured. So it teaches you a lot about yourself and how to relate and work with different people and understand their drivers. Because the reality is, you think you're mature when you're young, but you've got a lot to learn about the ways of life.
Now, how did you go at that age about managing? Because a lot of people when I speak to go into management, they worry about managing older people. So for instance, I'm in my 40s now. If I was going to be managed by a 21-year-old, I'd be like, what do they know? I would be maybe, I potentially might be disrespectful. I think actually, what would they know? So it must be quite difficult managing at 19 people in their 40s who've been there a long time, knew the ropes, knew the operations, and then they're probably thinking, yeah, spiky head, young lad, what does he know?
Yeah, it's terrifying. Absolutely, genuinely terrifying. But this is one of the key tenets for me that I learned in life, in that is you can invest time learning yourself. But I was fortunate enough to work for a company in its heyday, which Xerox was then, and Xerox invested in you. So they would go around all of the operations and all of the staff, and they would look for talent, and then they would develop that talent. They would invest in training courses. And a big benefit for me for working for that corporate is they taught me how to do it. The key difference, I'd say, from myself to other people is other people were sheep dipped on the training. I have been trained. They didn't change what they were doing. They've been on a training course. What I did is I practiced it. And I repeated it and I practiced it. It doesn't matter what you're doing in life, from golf, tennis, public speaking, managing people. If you practice what you've been taught over and over and again, you learn what works, you learn what doesn't work. Yeah. And for me, I found it difficult. And a lot of it was confidence, which I was lacking then, very, very shy. But I learned how to manage people. And if people tell you to F off, or if they walk off, you go, maybe I could have done that one differently.
Yeah, but the key that's some instant feedback right there.
It's the feedback, but the key difference is to hold the mirror up and say, what could I do differently? Whereas a lot of other people, they would blame the other person, but the only given constant in any situation is you. So first thing I always do is hold the mirror up and go, what could I do differently? And that self-reflection I found really useful, because yes, you will get some arseholes that you can't change over the years. But by and large, there's always something you could have done differently. And if you take that accountability, I think it's quite a good bedrock. Doesn't matter what job you're in.
So talking of managing people, you then went into sales and worked your way up and then became a manager yourself. So how difficult was it making the transition from sales into sales leadership?
I didn't find that transition as bad. I think because I had a baptism of fire when I was a lot younger, and by then I'd had more training invested in me. And also, as your team will know, I started my sales career in telesales. Yeah. And I don't care who you are, I would say one of the toughest jobs you can get into is new business telesales, because you haven't got this. Yeah. You can't look at people, you can't look at their reactions, you can't look at what they're wearing, so like you've got a bit of paint on your shirt. I've got some Wonder Wipes. I think they do. I think they take that off. You don't get to see that. You don't get to build a rapport. So what you actually get is a monosyllabic tone on the phone. And I remember distinctly, there was a guy who terrified me on the phone when I was in sales. And I thought this guy was a big ogre. And at the time I was lifting a lot of weights. So I was 16.5 stone and I'm 6'2", so quite a tall guy. I've gone to a conference and there's this really tiny, shy little guy in the corner, and I get introduced. And this is my nemesis. This is the guy I've been scared of. So once I learned that, I then start thinking, okay, sometimes you can live in your own head, and you can be scared of things. I've managed people before. The difference is those people didn't want to be there. They were being paid to do something they didn't want to do. The salespeople, they were easier because they wanted to be there, and they were by and large driven because they could earn some money. So actually for me, it then became about, okay, well, I've got people that are naturally, intrinsically motivated to be here. How do I get the best of them? So it's a very different way of managing people.
Yeah, because I find that when I did telesales 20 years ago, and recruitment was telesales then, and you had to go phone up for new business. And I got a lot of people. I don't like people brave over the phone. I really don't. When they started getting aggressive over not nowadays, but they were getting aggressive over the phone in those days. And similar to you, I'll be thinking, how dare? Why is that guy saying or girl saying that? And then you meet them, and then they're just like this menial, meek and mild person, but over the phone they're brave. Because I think it's the toughest job. Yeah, I think actually to go and do a telesales new business, especially cold calling, it's not a good job. It's a hard job. And very tough. Do you think that experience sort of grounded you into your career you've had? Because, and why I say that is, Marcus, I see a lot of people now. I'll give an example. I'll have someone come in, 23, 24. Oh yeah, I've done my time doing new business. It's like, you were working at Sainsbury's last year. You've done this for 3 months. What do you mean you've done your time doing new business? There's a real lack of determination to actually do new business, especially when you're younger. They want to do sort of social selling. So do you think that hard graft of actually doing cold calling, the resilience, the rejection, installed some good values into as you grew up your career?
I do, but I actually think it started earlier than that. I grew up in a very humble background, very poor. So for me, I had jobs. I was delivering leaflets when I was 6 or 7. I've always been tall, so I managed to get a paper round when I was earlier than I should have been. Then portering and kitchen portering, lugging luggage around. And actually, before I even went to university, I had 3 jobs at school and lived by myself in a bed sit by myself.
Wow.
So when you're doing that, you understand the value of graft, but you also understand what you get back for it. I also didn't leave university, albeit I left early, didn't leave with debt. I left with a hot hatch, with a car that I bought and insured, which cost me an arm and a leg. So again, I learned that if you put in hard graft, it doesn't matter if you're confident or talented or not, you'll get something for your efforts. For me, what sales taught me was a lot about confidence and a lot about not living in your own head versus the reality. And the difference with sales is I was actually going to go in the police force.
Really?
I did a year in finance and billing, which bridged me from operations to sales. And I realized then I wasn't very good at it, which is why I've got the utmost respect for now anyone in finance. But I was going to go in the police force, and the recruitment process was taking so long that I took a job in sales. And I took a job in sales because I moved to follow my now wife to Norfolk. There's very little white collar work there then and now. And the company, Midwich, an IT distributor that I joined, had a vacancy for a Xerox specialist. I didn't really even know what sales was, but they promised training. And what you found is the company had low attrition because of the nature of what it did and where it was, but sales itself has high attrition.
Yeah.
So you learn, well, actually, the company's a good company to work for. I need to change myself and I need to develop. But what it taught me is not being afraid of saying no. And my personal belief is when someone says no, it's because you haven't given them enough information to say yes. And I still have the same conversation with my team now, with their teams, and with their respective teams 3 layers down.
So when I looked at your career, and I don't want to take the piss when I say this, Mark, because
yes, you do.
Yeah, maybe I do a bit. Maybe I do a bit because my perception of document management solutions is sort of the dirty market of IT, but yet you've stayed in it and around it all the time. So you must have a passion for it. So what sort of kept? Because you must have had choices to go into other industries. You've worked for some brilliant companies, yet you've sort of stayed in and around it. So what's kept you in the industry?
That's a really great question, and that's, I think, the first time I've been asked it. I'd say the simple thing is I'm people driven, so it's people that make me tick. I love self-development and I love people, and I think the industry itself, and when I say the industry, I don't talk about what you want to call it, the print industry. I talk about technology industry, but print doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
So it's typically on a network, so it's a network citizen, which means it's part of the technology IT infrastructure. It's got a bad rap because it's longevity, because it is the most tenured, for want of a better word, product that's out there. But the reality is, when you sell a print contract, it's not fire and forget. It's not an impulse purchase. You are selling something that lasts 3, 5, 7 years. And then when you're refreshing it, again, it lasts for 3, 5, 7, 10 years. So actually what you're doing is you're selling to the customer a contractual relationship. And for me, the Internet of Things is about connecting more things to the network. Well, we've got 12,500 customers. Wow. A lot of them know us for print. Probably 3,000 know us for IT services, but around 10,000, they know us for print, but they trust us for print. Some have been with us 20, 30 years. So it's a natural thing to say, well, if you've got a contractual relationship with us and you measure us, how about you buy more things? So that's probably the reason why I haven't left. And you're right, I had the choices, because all I've seen is the rest of the market move over to contractual relationships or subscription.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we now call it. And therefore, for me, I'm already in that marketplace. We used to call it a managed service, which would scare the shit out of someone. If I said it's like Spotify or Netflix, you just pay money per month and you get something in return for it, and you don't really care how it happens, then they'd probably get it a bit more.